Assembly's moderator, Derek Rowland, so he can open up the town hall and introduce the minister. Derek, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate your kind words and for continuing to be here to support us for Minister MacLeod's 11th telephone town hall. The government has made some very recent announcements in the past month when we spoke last, including updates to the healthcare framework, and yesterday the provincial government announced the provincial budget in the legislature. My name is Derek Rowland. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Communications to the Honourable Lisa MacLeod, Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. And I'll be your moderator today, trying to fill the shoes of Tim Hudak, who has joined us on the past 11 calls but couldn't be with us today. Before we begin with some questions both from the audience and pre-submitted, I'm going to turn it over to Minister MacLeod for some opening remarks. Minister, over to you.
Thanks very much, Derek, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. If the 12th of March and the 9th of October were the lowest days of this pandemic for me and for many of you as we went into lockdown and also into some areas on October 9th, modified stage 2, I have to say that yesterday, November 5th, was a highlight in terms of moving toward hope and recovery in the province of Ontario. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Honourable Rod Phillips, the Finance Minister of our great province, who delivered, I think, an historic budget yesterday that has a lot of good news for us. And again, I know that the last several months have been hard on our sectors and the people that we support, but through all of the efforts of the ministry and through our industry partners, I believe we have been able in many cases to be able to stabilize. I want to run through some of the investments that impact our ministry and direct investments that will be made to our industry through this ministry, but also some complementary government approach opportunities that we've identified within the budget. We have important news on tax credits for our sectors. In 2021, Ontario will offer Canada's most generous travel tax credit to encourage hyper-local tourism. The tax credit will be 20% of travel receipts. For our suite of cultural tax credits administered through Ontario Creates, we're going to be extending deadlines and claim periods by an additional 24 months to allow productions to receive support through the Ontario Film and Television Tax Credit and the Ontario Production Services Tax Credit. Labor expenditures for the Ontario Interactive Digital Media Tax Credit will be extended by an additional 24 months, and we will temporarily waive the publishing requirement to receive the Ontario Book Publishing Tax Credit for 2021 years. The ministry will also deliver a $100 million community building fund to sports, culture, and tourism over the next 2 years through the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and an additional $25 million in funding to the Ontario Arts Council. We will also continue with the redevelopment of Ontario Place. Here are some highlights on how the budget will deliver on our projects, programs, and policies with other ministries as we take a whole-of-government approach to support our sectors. $1.8 billion in supports for People and Jobs Fund to adapt to respond to emerging needs. $1 billion in broadband expansion to support rural communities. $300 million recently announced to cover supports for businesses in hot zones, to cover property taxes and energy bills. $180.5 million for skilled trades development, which will help our hospitality and culture sectors. $60 million for one-time costs for PPE and small businesses. $60 million for a Black Youth Action Plan. $57 million for a digital Main Street. $10 million for Indigenous-owned businesses. $6 million to electrify Ontario's campsites. $5 million to support agriculture and horticultural societies, support for Francophone businesses, canceling the wine tax increase and freezing beer tax rates, looking at other options for food, service, and hospitality delivery, and establishing a market for iGaming. I will continue to work hard to preserve and protect our spectacular double bottom line together with all of you. You've all worked so hard over these last number of months, and it warms my heart that we were able yesterday to start delivering on a 5-year strategic plan within our sectors. And I look forward to all of your questions and your comments, and I'd now like to turn it over to my friend and my colleague, Rod Phillips.
Thank you, Minister MacLeod. And I have to say that it is great to have this opportunity to speak with all of you. Lisa and I were just in Ottawa together making some announcements related to some important healthcare investments. But when the pandemic began, one of the first things that the Premier asked was that I form a committee of the ministers who had economic responsibilities called the Jobs and Recovery Committee, and we've met weekly since early April to try to make sure we understood the situation on the ground. And I have to compliment Lisa for the work she's done, and of course all of our colleagues did great work. But second to none was Lisa MacLeod in terms of the connections that I know she had already built, but I think those connections have become deeper in terms of the many sectors and areas that are represented on this call and that have been so hard hit by this pandemic. So it was a pleasure to work with her in terms of the initiatives that she has mentioned and outlined. We know how difficult, and I know I've had a chance to meet with many of you individually as well, but we do know how challenging this has been, and we also know, and I know I speak for Lisa and I speak for the Premier when I say this, how important to our long-term recovery these sectors are going to be, and that's why we have to take like the ones that we took yesterday, and of course continuing to listen going forward. Those of you who have had a chance to look at the budget will know there are three areas. Of course, a lot about protecting, very important, and I know all of you are very supportive of the work we're doing on that side, making sure we're supporting communities and businesses. But this idea of recovering, for some people, it's a third leg in our stool, if you will. There are some folks who think it's maybe too ambitious to start talking about that, and I can understand that given what people have gone through. But do know that our government is also thinking about the future. We laid out a 3-year plan, the first significant jurisdiction to do that. I think Quebec's going to follow in the next week or so. But that's because we know we need to plan for the future, and that's part of what makes these conversations so important. So, Lisa, I know you want to get some questions and answers, and I'm happy to stay on for as long as I can, just on my way to something else as well that I have to attend at. But I just want to thank you for your leadership and for including me in the call today.
Well, thank you very much, Rod. I appreciate that. I know my stakeholders and everybody on the call does. Derek, do we have a couple questions for the Finance Minister?
We have a couple of questions lined up, Minister, as well as ones that are applicable to the Finance Minister. So the first one, both ministers, comes from Krista Leclerc at Kingston Tourism, and her question is your government considering a travel tax credit for Ontarians?
Well, why don't we let Rod talk about that?
Yes, well, listen, that very much was an idea that I know has been canvassed through the work that Lisa did, and that's why yesterday we announced the tax credit, which we will work, of course, with the groups on the phone and through Lisa's good offices to determine what the best way to roll that out is. One proviso, you will have heard me. First of all, I called it the Ontario Staycation, and Lisa was good enough to correct me around hyper-local is our branding. I have to tell you, though, that having done probably 40 media interviews, and I think this is great for the sector, this has been one of the number one things people have wanted to hear about. And I have been emphasizing, of course, we're going to bring that into place in a way that's safe. But I have to tell you that I think it's also a signal about hope and opportunity among people in Ontario. As I've been saying, and I've been saying, we want to make 2020 the year of the Ontario Staycation. And I think, once we get to a place that's safe to travel, obviously traveling in our borders will be better and easier and safer than traveling outside our borders. And I do think Ontarians will feel like they've earned a vacation. So the details of that tax credit we're going to be working on together. We want to make sure it works, it is applicable, and I'll turn it over to Lisa if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. I think it's really important. Over the summer, I had an 11-week tour across our great province, and I felt that was really necessary. So I identified a tax credit early on as something that would reinstill confidence with Ontarians to move around, as well as stimulate the economy. We've seen things like this, time-limited credits before, had massive success during the last recession. So when we were working with the Jobs and Recovery Committee, we decided we would move on something like this. So what Minister Phillips announced yesterday was a 20% tax credit for eligible expenses. As he mentioned, we're going to be working on that, and it would be about a $150 million program, which is quite significant. We're continuing to work on the details, but at this point in time, I think it is a very big signal of hope for our struggling and ailing sector, and it's one that I think it would be great if the federal government would consider amplifying for us.
Thank you very much, Ministers. We're going to actually stay with the theme of tax credits, but shifting for a moment to film, television, and digital media production. Ministers, the first question comes from Cameron McLaren. He's a director with Guru Studios, and he asks, will Ontario increase the tax credit rates for film, television, and digital media productions coming out of the pandemic?
Okay, I'll start with this one, and then maybe Rod would like to add to it. But the Minister and I have both a joint film advisory panel that's looking into four things. One is the stabilization of our tax credit system and streamlining them. The second is increasing film-friendly locations. The third is supporting above and below the line talent. And I'm pleased that yesterday's announcement has significant investments for labor, reskill training for below the line talent. And finally, ensuring that we have more Canadian content. So I know in the budget yesterday, we were able to extend deadlines for our suite of five tax credits within the ministry through Ontario Creates, and we look forward to working closely with our partners in this industry. So we'll release the details soon, but that work by the Ministerial Advisory Committee continues, and they will be reporting back to both the Minister of Finance and myself in the fall of 2021, so effectively a year from now. Minister, did you have anything else you'd like to add?
Just to say, I think that the Minister MacLeod's suggestion, and I was very happy to take it up to strike such a committee, really understands not just where we are, given what's happened. Of course, the idea pre-sage the pandemic, but now I think that advice can be even more valuable because with things changing as quickly as they are in many industries, but film and television being one that's very transportable and very valuable, we'll look forward to getting that advice.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're joined today by nearly 1,000 people on the telephone who I know are very appreciative of not only the hard work that you both have done, but certainly on the tax credit side of things as well. Before we go to the next question, I would like to remind everyone on the phone that if you do want to ask a question to either of the ministers here in the limited time that we have left with the Finance Minister, please press 3 on your phone, and we will do our best to get to you as soon as we possibly can. Ministers, the next question actually is similar to what you discussed in your opening remarks, Minister MacLeod, related to agricultural festivals and supports. And it comes from Tara Kirkpatrick, who's an economic development officer with the Township of North Glengarry. Her question is, what sort of programming will be offered in 2021 to help large agricultural festivals and events return to rural regions?
Lisa, would you like me to take this one?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Can you believe it? 9 months into this pandemic. You go right ahead.
Both Minister MacLeod and Minister Hardeman made some very important, I think important recognition for the cabinet and for the Premier about the importance. And of course, I've had the chance to attend, and and really this comes down to the very valuable agricultural and horticultural societies that we have across our province, really part of the fabric. So I'll just speak maybe to the part from an OMAFRA point of view, and then Lisa can speak to the broader opportunity. But we've set aside $5 million to be specific support. We know that the loss of revenue from canceled fairs and canceled events really hits at the heart of the ability of horticulture and agriculture societies to do the great work that they do that's so vital in our rural communities. So that's a specific approach that I know Lisa will be coordinating with Mr. Hardeman on, but Mr. MacLeod, you might want to talk about some of the other supports in that area.
Yeah, thanks very much, Minister Phillips. So I think this is an excellent opportunity to take the whole of government approach with targeted investments in various ministries that are complementary. And so obviously the $5 million fund that Minister Hardeman will have will complement a reinvigorate and more strong Celebrate Ontario type of fund, where we will continue to support these types of festivals around the province, including in our rural areas. The second thing that we've started to do more of in the ministry is have our agencies not only collaborate together within our 18 agencies and attractions, but also reach out to complementary organizations. For example, when it comes to supporting local and hyper-local marketing and tourism, looking at our culinary and craft opportunities with both the LCBO and Foodland Ontario. So I think we're going to see a better and more integrated approach with these sectors, and it certainly will be part of our 5-year strategic plan that we will be going out through our white paper in the next couple of weeks to all of you, getting your input on how we can best amplify these local experiences.
Thank you very much, Ministers. Now, I know we're coming to the end of our time with Minister Phillips before he needs to get off the line, but we do have one final question that we'll put forward to him. Minister Phillips, this question comes from Sarah Kerr-Hornell, who's the Coast Manager with Ontario Sailing, and she asks, how can the industry assist with the post-budget work?
Sarah, thank you very much. That's appreciated. And as I've said to some people, this budget, it's a very unusual thing to have a budget in November, but it is in some ways the first act of a 2-act play, because we also have a budget that will be coming out in March. As some of you would see, and I mentioned this was a 3-year budget. We hope in our March budget to be able to look again a little bit longer term. So through that process, we will have our consultations and conversations will keep going, using, I think, some of the great relationships that have been built through Minister MacLeod and others, and we'll be looking to understand what people see as the next step. I've been very kind, and then Minister MacLeod was very kind about commenting on the success of yesterday's event, but really that success is with the people we spoke to, the broad range of people from across the province who've been kind enough to give us their suggestions so that we can stay in touch with what's happening and therefore what the government should be doing. So we'll begin those consultations as you would expect with an unusual November budget and then March budget. We'll begin those consultations quite soon, and we'll hope that people will have a chance to be a part of them. And of course, again, through this connection that's been built as a result of the very difficult situation of COVID, we'll make sure we take advantage of that to get the best advice. And again, we'll never promise to be perfect. We'll try to do our very best. It's easier when we listen to people. So that'll be our approach. And maybe, Lisa, I'll just, as I step off, just again, thank you for the work you've been doing. Thank everybody who's on this call. I know some of the people who are involved in this, but I know all of you through the many people that we get to meet, and I know that you are exactly the type of community members that aren't just involved in your industry, but you're also very active in your communities wherever you live. So thank you for the leadership that all of you have shown through this 9 months now, and for what we need to do going forward. This is history that we are living in terms of some of the most challenging times that many of us will face, and we wouldn't be where we are with the support of all of you and people like you. So thank you for that leadership, and Lisa, again to you, thank you for including me today, but thank you for the role you play.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rod. It was great to see you in Ottawa today. For all those that are listening at home, we were a bit rushed because Rod and I were actually on the podium with the Premier at the top of a parking garage in Ottawa. And so we're now just getting settled. And I wish you much success, Rod, in the weeks ahead as you roll out this budget. And I look forward to continuing to work with you. And thank you for taking the time to be with my stakeholders today. So, Sarah, I just wanted to add as well, in the post-budget work within the ministry, I had the opportunity last week to speak to the Empire Club and lay out 15 proposals in addition to some of these budget announcements on how we would be working toward a 5-year strategic plan in the ministry. And of course, in the next couple of weeks, we will be unveiling a white paper with recommendations, and we want your feedback. So I find that we've done a lot of consultation throughout this process, and many of you, I hope, should be very happy with seeing the budget yesterday, that the advice that you have provided me has helped inform those decisions, and that will continue. We will continue to work with all of you to see how we can best address the challenges our sectors are facing.
Thank you very much, Ministers, and a special thank you to Minister Rod Phillips, the Minister of Finance for the province of Ontario, for joining us here today. Folks, you're listening to Minister Lisa MacLeod's 11th telephone town hall with the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. We want to thank you again for joining us here this afternoon. We have nearly 1,000 people on the call listening in here today. Minister, before we go to the telephone, we do have another question here, actually from the sports sector, and it's from Cesar Borskowski, who's the owner of the Northern Karate Schools. His question to you is, when will person-to-person practice return? Martial arts practice is a dual sport, he indicates.
Well, thanks very much, Cesar. Our first priority obviously remains the health and well-being of Ontarians, including our athletes, our coaches, and our volunteers. And as you probably have already heard from the news today, we continue to deal with restricted areas across the province, including now Peel, in order for us to deal with the hospital capacity issues with respect to overworking, and then, of course, making sure we limit the spread of COVID-19. And while Ontario's public health experts have been clear that contact in sports should not occur to help to stop the spread, we are committed to finding a solution that facilitates a safe return to play. I had a lengthy meeting this morning with my colleague, the Minister of Health, as well as Dr. David Williams, about some of these very specific areas. The Keeping Ontario Safe and Open framework takes a gradual approach that includes introducing preventative measures earlier to help avoid broader closures and allow for additional public health and workplace safety measures to be introduced or removed incrementally. So this is very much a case-by-case and issue-by-issue and day-by-day situation. We will continue to monitor trends in public health on an ongoing basis to see if we must increase or ease restrictions at any point in time. We also know that our $12.6 billion sports and recreation sector can't afford to be sidelined, so that's why we continue to work with the sports leagues, including our PSOs earlier this week, all 66 of them, to ensure Ontario's athletes can return to play as soon as it's safe to do so. So again, a great question. I'm not providing you with the answer likely that you want, but we do continue to ask the health table to provide us with clear criteria on when we might be able to ease those restrictions to get back to doing what you do best.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to shift gears for a moment and go to the telephone lines to see what questions we have coming in from the audience. Eric, can we please tee up the first question?
We have our first live caller. It's Jason joining us from Carfax, Ontario. Jason, welcome.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Minister, for everything and your hard work lately. I think we're all probably on this call applauding your hard work for making all the support possible. I'm with Carfax, Ontario. We're the Association of Visual Artists in Ontario. So my question is regarding the $25 million, the one-time $25 million investment in the Ontario Arts Council. Is this funding intended to flow exclusively to organizations and institutions, or will this one-time funding also be extended to individual practitioners and artists as well?
Thanks very much. That was very kind of you to say. Thank you very much for those nice words. At the moment, this $25 million will be dedicated to institutions. Having said that, we have taken every effort to fast-track funding to individuals throughout Ontario Creates and Ontario Arts Council over the last little bit. We will be looking at other ways to support the Ontario Arts Council and the Ontario Trillium Foundation, who did receive, both of them, quite a boost and increase, likely the biggest increase they've either received since they started. And we're going to continue to look at other ways we can make targeted investments. So in one case, we were able to work with a group called Music Together to make a significant investment at the very early stages of this pandemic to get liquidity into the hands of artists. We continue to look at that. The Finance Minister just sort of also said, Jason, that there will be this budget is like a bookend because there will be another budget coming in March, and as a result, we are still working on other ways where we might be able to start to support other sectors, looking at what that might look like with the music fund, for example, looking at possibilities for sports and arts. So for the short answer at the moment is this is intended for cultural institutions. The long answer over a period of time is we are going to continue to be flexible and try to get liquidity out into the sector based on our existing allocation, and then looking through the multi-year planning process as well as the next budget to see how we can do even more targeted support. So yesterday was just one piece of the process. There are many other moving parts, and I know that while we've delivered on a lot yesterday to support our sectors, more does need to be done. And so we will encourage you to be part of that white paper process and bring your ideas forward. And just because it wasn't announced yesterday doesn't mean additional supports won't be available in the next few months.
Great. Thank you very much for the question. Folks, once again, you're joined by more than 1,000 individuals on the call. You are listening in to Minister Lisa MacLeod's 11th telephone town hall. And I would encourage you again, if you do want to ask a question from the telephone lines, please press 3 on your touch tone phone, and a representative will speak with you to collect your information. Minister, we're going to go back to some of the pre-submitted questions here. Your next one actually comes in from Bonnie Baker, who is also asking about art sector support. She's in St. Catharines, and she says, does the government plan to open up support of arts and cultural organizations with funding for operating costs through to 2021, or will it extend beyond just the 1 year?
Yeah, thank you for that. The government, as I just mentioned, is providing one-time emergency funding of $25 million for our institutions to cover operating losses incurred as a result of COVID-19. But this funding, while it will provide immediate relief, is not the only opportunity to have funding through our agencies. We have an $83 million resiliency fund through the Ontario Trillium Foundation. So decisions will be made on that in the next couple of weeks, but there is still an intake process there. So I would encourage you to look at that opportunity for your organization. We have a $7 million fund provided through the Ontario Music Investment Fund, which opened in May of 2020. The Ontario Arts Council did pivot with early in the pandemic with a $1.6 million arts response initiative, and as I mentioned, we were working with Music Together. We already provided over $10 million to support festivals, and we continue to look and take projects in incrementally over the new Reconnect funds. So we're going to continue to work on those things. We're trying to get as much money out the door as possible. But right now, the $25 million for the Ontario Arts Council will be for those organizations. And as I indicated, we'll continue to work on other opportunities to support the sector.
Thank you again very much, Minister. Your next question actually is going to be shifting gears a little bit, talking about skilled trades. And it comes from Anne-Marie Forcier, who's with the St. Lawrence College. And her question is, are Ontario colleges part of your tourism workforce recovery plan?
Thanks very much. Yeah, so the government was pretty clear yesterday that skills development and training will be a top priority, where we're going to be investing $180.5 million into this. And I spoke at length this morning with the Finance Minister, who I spent some time with, about the requirement for our sectors, whether that's in tourism and hospitality or in the cultural sector, whether it's music, film, television, and animation, etc., to be able to connect workers to some of the new jobs and then retrain people where it's required. So we understand that you're the most affected by the pandemic, so that's why over the next 3 years we will be detailing a skilled trade strategy, a dedicated investment through Employment Ontario for skills training, and a redesigned second career program. I'll continue to work with Monty McNaughton, the Minister of Labour, Skills, Trade and Development. He has been out to a number of our different events. We should actually probably do a webinar with him at some point because he understands that the creative sectors and the tourism sectors have opportunities for jobs in the future, but also have a number of people who will need to be retrained. So, Anne-Marie, that was a great question, and it's a really important one.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to go back to the telephone lines for the next question, which comes from someone in Sarnia. Eric, can I turn it over to you, please?
Absolutely. We have Mark from Tourism, Sarnia Lambton, joining us now. Mark, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Thanks, Minister MacLeod, for all the support you've done for our industry. And just wanted to ask about Celebrate Ontario, if that was a program that was going to be continued after the Reconnect program is done this March.
Yeah, great question. So we will be making some announcements in the very near future with respect to Reconnect. What's crossed my desk are some very creative, innovative ways for Ontarians to reconnect, and I'm very excited about that. So an announcement will be made soon. At the Empire Club of Canada last Friday, I talked about my desire to have a stronger, more robust Celebrate Ontario fund and a stronger, more robust sport hosting program. So we will be offering these types of funding and investments. We just want to see how we can do more. And I will be asking throughout the white paper process for your thoughts and your suggestions so we can streamline the processes, land major events in the down years, and we will be really working with our regional tourism organizations to help develop that strategy. I think, if next year is going to be, as Rod says, the year of the staycation or hyper-local marketing, I think that there has to be a view for not only allowing these festivals and events to come back next year, but when it's safe to do so, and we welcome people back into our borders from international destinations, then we're really going to want to have that infrastructure in place. So you have my commitment to continue to build out that program, but build it out better and stronger to support more people.
Thank you, Minister. We only have about 10 minutes left, but we'll see if we can get through as many more questions that we have available here today. Minister, I know many across the province are looking forward to the winter months and what that's going to mean for sport tourism across the province. And your next question comes from John Ball, who is the General Manager of Snow Valley Resort in my neck of the woods, close to Barrie, Ontario. And his question is, has there been any thought to include ski resorts and snow sports in the reopening plan?
Yes, a short answer, John. Yes, I've been working with my ADM, Steve Harlow, and my Deputy Minister, Nancy Matthews, on what a safe return to winter sport looks like, particularly where you're able to physically distance, where you're able to participate with limited numbers of people. So we hope to work with our partners in the ski resorts and snow sports industry to develop a safe return to sport, much like what was done back in May with the golf industry. And I had a great meeting with Golf Canada just the other day about some of the fantastic work they were doing. And I think that snow sports are going to be the next golf as we go through the second phase of this pandemic. So the Keeping Ontario Safe and Open framework takes a gradual approach, and it will include introducing preventative measures earlier to help avoid closures. But we're going to continue to work with the health table to get clarity and in order to provide a safe winter experience, a recreational experience, and quite frankly, a social experience for Ontarians this summer. So, John, really appreciate that, and I do hope when it's deemed safe enough to do so, I can go up and visit you.
Thanks, Minister. I'm actually going to play a Tim Hudak card here and take a moderator's prerogative with a question that's thrown your way, because I know a lot of individuals on the line are trying to look forward to when we can return to a semblance of normalcy. And I'm sure many want to know if we're continuing to work with the federal government, particularly on the tourism file, as the provincial borders, the national borders are closed at the moment. It's my question to you is, how are we continuing to work with the federal government on this issue?
Right. Well, we meet with the federal government. I meet weekly with my Minister of Heritage, Sport and Culture, and bi-weekly with all federal, provincial, territorial ministers of tourism. And it's absolutely critical that, as I encourage cities that normally would compete like Ottawa and Toronto to work together as we return to we recover tourism, it's going to be equally important for those of us at the provincial, federal, and territorial levels to meet with one another as well, to encourage national staycations at the appropriate time. And I'm pleased to announce that I am already working with the province of Quebec and their Minister of Tourism to set out a date where we can have a home and home summit to talk about how the two largest provinces in the country can recover together when it's safe to do so. My main focus, however, right now is supporting our sectors through hyper-local activity, and then gradually, as it's safe to do so, open it back up to the more Canadian domestic staycation. And then finally, I believe in 4 or 5 years out, we'll be in a position to start welcoming international travelers back to a volume we saw in 2019.
Thanks, Minister. We only have about 5 minutes left here, but I have another question before we maybe go into closing remarks. And this comes from Remo Palladini. He is the owner of the ABV, who is an events production company. And his question to you is, will there be a chance to have large events in 2021?
Look, while it's still hard to say what might happen, this pandemic has been very unpredictable. We remain committed to getting people together when it's safe to do so. So at the moment, no, I don't see in the next couple of months that happening. But as we look to the federal government in terms of how they're looking at a vaccine and effective treatment and rapid testing, we have to plan for those scenarios. But we're going to continue, as I said, to invest our money into festivals and events. We're going to continue to invest into sport hosting. I announced last week, for example, that Ontario will support FIFA's bid, Soccer Canada's bid for the FIFA World Cup. We would want to see that supported throughout the province if they land that. We'll work with the Commonwealth Games to see if we can land a bid there. And there are a number of other international events that we would like to take place in Ontario when it's safe to do so. We are going to aggressively pursue opportunities, and we will make sure that we are planning appropriately for those outer years. But again, in terms of 2021, I think it's still just too unpredictable.
Folks, you're listening to Minister Lisa MacLeod's 11th telephone town hall discussing the government's response to COVID-19, as well as the most recent provincial budget that was tabled yesterday in the legislature. We want to thank you again for joining us here today. But before we go, as we have come to the end of our time, Minister, why don't I turn it over to you for some closing remarks?
Yeah, I think if you want to take one more question, Derek, I'd like that. That would be great.
Okay, let me see if I can just get one more teed up here on the phone. Eric, why don't I turn it over to you for the next question from the telephone?
All right. We have another live question, and just one moment while we get that queued up. We have Shazia from 770 AM radio joining us. Shazia, welcome. You're joining us live.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Minister. Thank you very much for talking to us. My whole question is that amid COVID-19, although it is very, very good news that the Ontario government has allocated a certain budget for heritage and cultural and sports and all that, but because of the restrictions on movement from one province to another or from one city to another, how far do you think this allocation will help the ministry, because the cultural activities and the sports, all that those are at halt at the moment?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the announcement yesterday for the tax credit will actually take effect likely at the beginning of spring next year, when we believe it will be safer to do so. And so we're going to work with the industry in order to get the details finalized. But again, we're not encouraging people to travel right at the moment. We're encouraging people to support hyper-local initiatives. So a few of the things that we're doing is the $9 million Reconnect Fund for people to do drive-in and drive-through events, as well as virtual events. We will continue to support things like Music Together, where people can visit digitally, and Destination Ontario will be engaging in a hyper-local marketing campaign across the province to amplify what we did over the summer, encouraging people to reconnect safely in their own communities. At this time, however, we still are taking a cautious approach with respect to the economy, and while museums are still open, as well as some cultural and tourism attractions, there are still rules around numbers of people being inside them. I did have the opportunity today to go to the Canadian War Museum with the Premier. And I can say I had an excellent and safe experience. And so really we're encouraging Ontarians right now to support their local communities, buy local, and visit their local areas and reconnect in their own backyards. And then hopefully we're going to be in a position in the spring to support more circulation around our province.
Thank you very much, Minister. We have come to the end of our time here together, but before we depart and turn it back over to Eric, I'll leave it open to you for any closing remarks.
Okay, thanks everyone. I appreciate your patience today. Literally myself and the Minister of Finance rushed off the podium. We were a bit delayed today, and so we got off to a little bit of a late start, but really appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with all of you. Again, the highlights from the budget yesterday, hundreds of millions of dollars being invested into this ministry, and billions into our sectors through supports in a variety of other ministries. And so I encourage you to continue to monitor what we're offering and see how we can best support you. Remember, you can always write to minister.macleod@ontario.ca if you have any questions. My staff love to help you, and I certainly love being your minister, so we want to make sure we get you the answers as quickly as we possibly can. I appreciate the patience for those who are still dealing with reopening, and I continue to meet with the Health Table as well as the Jobs and Recovery Committee of Cabinet. If you haven't done so already, please visit the Empire Club's website and check out the speech I delivered last week in terms of our vision for the ministry and how you can play a part in it. And again, at the end of November, we will be coming out with a white paper. We will want your input on how we can best deliver on these initiatives and build out these programs over the next 5 years so we can reemerge, reconnect, and then rebuild these suites of sectors. And again, as I said, yesterday was a very important day. We were able to announce significant investments into these sectors, but there are still other ongoing processes. And so if you feel left out right now, please just keep contacting us and sharing your ideas. And we want to make sure we can support everyone as best we possibly can. Remember, the Premier said he'll leave no stone unturned to get Ontarians through this crisis and this pandemic. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Earlier today, the Premier and I were able to announce a $3 million commitment to the Valor Games, which will be the first of its kind in the country, and it will support ill and injured veterans. And I have to say, as the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries, that announcement checks all of the boxes within this ministry. But more importantly, I think it signaled today that the first announcement post-budget by the Premier of Ontario was for our sectors. And so I believe in that confidence in us. And in turn, we're going to have to restore confidence within our sectors with everyone else across the province. So with that, thank you. I hope you all have a healthy and safe weekend. Keep up the good work. Can't wait to chat with you next. Thank you.
Thank you again, Minister MacLeod, for hosting us here today for your 11th telephone town hall. I know we received a lot of positive feedback from today's event, as well as those that we've done in the past. We'll continue to make ourselves available. Once again, that email account, if you do have a question or a concern that you'd like to raise with the Minister, is minister.macleod, MACLEOD, @ontario.ca. And with that, Eric, I'll turn it over to you to end today's call.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As mentioned, if you do have any questions or feedback you would like to share with Minister MacLeod and the ministry, you can do so by email. The email is minister.macleod@ontario.ca. Again, minister.macleod@ontario.ca. You can email questions and feedback there. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good afternoon.